with the news that former Celtic and Scotland striker Leigh Griffiths has re-signed for Australian lower league club Mandurah City after a lengthy period as an unwanted free agent, I wanted to take a look at how such a talented player who once had the world at his feet is ending his career with such a sad whimper. Leigh Griffiths made his professional debut at 16 for First Division side Livingston in 2006. He was in good company in terms of young academy products, as that period could be classed as something of a mini golden generation in terms of young homegrown talent for the club, as Griffiths was also coming through at the same time as the likes of Graham Dorrans and Robert Snodgrass. While occasionally featuring for the first team, Griffiths won the SFL Under-19 League with Livy's youth side, and by the 08-09 season he had established himself as a regular with the first team, hitting an impressive 17 league goals in 27 appearances. The young striker was set to move on to bigger and better things, and had a few options as he trained with both Parma and West Brom, with the latter being excited enough by the Scot to move for him permanently, a deal which fell through due to the departure of Tony Mowbray, the man who had been keen on bringing him in. As it was, he went to another team in the same division, Dundee, for £125,000. In his 2 seasons there, Griffiths endeared himself to the fans with his performances and important goals, including 3 vital ones, as he was key to Dundee's 2010 Challenge Cup victory in his first season, a smashing 30-yard free kick against Rangers in the League Cup. While just a consolation in the match itself, will forever live in the memory of fans, and was just an early taste of what the set-piece specialist would go on to do in his career. Throughout Griffiths' time at Dundee, the club were beset by financial issues, entering administration in 2010 and being docked 25 points. There was also an accusation from old club Livingston that in 2011, nearly 2 years after his transfer, they still hadn't received the fee, although Dundee denied this. At least this time, a piece of controversy surrounding the striker wasn't caused by the player himself. This would basically be the last time that could be said. Leigh Griffiths secured a move to Wolves in January 2011, though wouldn't make an appearance for them that season, being loaned to Hibs for the first 6 months of the 11-12 campaign, a deal which would be extended at the last minute to cover the whole season. The Scottish Premiership was the highest level of football that Griffiths had played at in his career, and he struggled goal-wise in his first season with the Hibees, scoring just 8 in the league. He would also struggle off the pitch, as what was to become an infamous inability to control himself would begin to rear its ugly head. Within just 2 months at the end of 2011 and the start of 2012, Griffiths was suspended a whopping 3 times for doing the same exact thing, gesturing in a lewd and offensive manner towards supporters who were giving him stick. A frustrated statement from his manager Pat Fenlon after his second suspension showcases how difficult it was to get through to the 21-year-old. I've spoken to Leigh about this. We had a conversation after the Rangers game, and obviously it didn't register too quickly.
It was obviously a really silly thing to do, and that's made it be done 3 times now. Obviously I think I would have learned after the first 2 times, but obviously I've done it again, and I can tell you now that it won't happen again.
Not long after his 3rd suspension for making inappropriate signs, Griffiths continued his campaign to become a sort of Caledonian Cantona, at least in terms of controversies, by reportedly headbutting his manager and lamping the assistant. According to several news outlets, Griffiths allegedly flew off the handle after being singled out for criticism following some poor recent performances, most notably in a derby defeat to Hearts. I must say that both Pat Fenlon and Hibs deny that this ever happened, although, knowing the character of the man, it doesn't sound at all outlandish. Despite proving to be a walking suspension, Hibs spectacularly agreed to take Griffiths on loan again for the first half of the 12-13 season. Perhaps his winning goal in the Scottish Cup semi-final had been enough to erase all past misdemeanours. Griffiths came flying out the blocks, scoring 4 and assisting 2 in his first 6 games, as Hibs recovered from a disappointing opening day defeat to go on a 6-game unbeaten run. This red-hot form would see him claim the SPL's Player of the Month award for August. He would continue his scoring streak, netting in 6 consecutive games through October and November, including 2 braces in a row against Motherwell and St Mirren. His impressive goal scoring earned him his first Scotland cap in a friendly against Luxembourg in December's international break. The player's form dipped after this, as he managed to score just 2 in 7, although, to be fair, this did include the only goal in a famous and unexpected 1-0 win against Celtic. In January 2013, Griffiths went back to parent club Wolves so that they could get a better look at him and see whether to recall him, when he was again at the centre of a huge controversy, perhaps his most unpleasant thus far, as he was widely contemned and criticised for a racist comment he made to Zach Iqbal, a Twitter user who had apparently provoked him. He told Iqbal to go back to his own country. Maybe the dumbest kind of racist abuse that you can make to someone. Wolves, Hibs, the SFA, and Show Racism the Red Card were all united in their castigation of Griffiths, who was also involved in another couple examples of bizarre off-field behaviour around about the same time, reportedly angrily berating a poor McDonald's worker who had forgotten to take the gherkins off his burger. Secondly, he was charged with shoplifting, for which he was later cleared cleared, although he was fined £100 and warned by the judge for the violent way he tried to protest his innocence to the guard. In light of the controversy, his parent club decided it best that his loan was extended, and he quickly put this unsavoury incident behind him and got back to doing what he does best, bagging boatloads of goals. The feat of scoring in every league match in February earned him another Player of the Month award, and he scored his first ever professional hat-trick in the Scottish Cup against Kilmarnock, and would net a dramatic injury time winner in the semi-final of the same competition to complete a stunning victory. Hibs would lose the final 3-0 to Celtic. Griffiths ended the season with 23 league goals and 28 in all competitions, which quite rightly saw him receive several personal professional accolades. He was named PFA Young Player of the Year, SPL Player of the Year, and SFWA Footballer of the Year. Quite a year on and off the pitch for Griff, and the Hibs naturally wanted to keep the prolific young striker. Seeing how well he had gotten on in Scotland though, Wolves rejected any advances for the forward and signed him up on a long-term deal. Leigh Griffiths picked up where he left off at Hibs and started to rip it up in League One as well, scoring 12 and assisting 3 in the 23 league games up to January. He also managed to control himself off the pitch and avoided any media storms down in England. Such form, added of course to his exploits with Hibs, had gotten Scottish champion Celtic interested. Wolves rebuffed a couple of bids for their top scorer before accepting a third bid of £1 million on 31st of January 2014, and Griffiths headed back over the border to Scotland with Parkhead and the East End of Glasgow his destination. He made his debut for Celtic on 8th of February in a Scottish Cup 5th round tie, coming on for the final 27 minutes. The striker was unable to turn the game around, and Celtic would be dumped out by Aberdeen, losing 2-1. 8 days later, and he would make his league debut for Celtic, where a beautiful striking partnership with Anthony Stokes would start to blossom, as Leigh assisted the first goal of his new mate's hat-trick against St Johnstone. He would go on to feature in all but one of Celtic's remaining 13 games, and play superbly well alongside Stokes, scoring 7 and assisting 8, with the zenith of the duo's displays that season coming in a rampant 6-0 rout of Cali Thistle. His half a season back in Scotland naturally did not pass without controversy, as in April a couple of mobile phone videos of the Celtic striker chanting with Hibs fans in an Edinburgh boozer emerged, the first of which saw him gleefully sing about City rivals' Hearts' dire financial situation, and the second again had tinges of racism as he was shouting about how Hearts Czech midfielder Rudy Skacel was a refugee. He was investigated by the SFA and the police, but manager Neil Lennon was rather fatherly towards his player in the press, not condoning his actions, but acknowledging that the player needed help to avoid getting wound up, and that he would get the help he needs at Celtic. He later ended up in court over this whole affair. The following season would generally be one to forget for Griffiths, as new manager Ronnie Dyla took issue with the forward's less than impressive fitness and hardly used him for the first half of the season. He helped to endear himself to the Celtic fans though, with a goal and a suitably shithousing celebration to help dump City rivals Rangers out of the League Cup in the semis. From there, his season would really kick into gear, and he would incredibly score 2 hat-tricks in April against Kilmarnock and Dundee respectively. Griffiths would finish the season with 14 league goals from as many starts and 24 appearances, as Celtic secured a league and cup double. Dyla praised his players' end-of-season form with a particular emphasis on his fitness improving, although the manager still stressed that the striker wasn't yet the 24-hour athlete that he expects his players to be, admitting the striker was known to scoff cakes while sitting on the bench. The 15-16 season was to be Leigh Griffiths' finest hour in football, and a campaign that he has dined out on ever since. It's this season that makes me so frustrated with him, as it proves that if he had a more professional attitude, he could have gone on to be an all-time Celtic great. Leigh Griffiths scored a fucking phenomenal 40 goals for Celtic that season, with 31 coming in the league. His exploits that campaign had him breathing some rarefied air. In January, he became the fastest player since Charlie Nicholas in the 80s to hit 50 goals for the boys, beating club legends like John Hartson and Henrik Larsson to the landmark, achieving the feat in only 60 starts. Speaking of Larsson, Leigh Griffiths was the first Celtic player to grab 40 goals in a season since the Swedish superstar had graced the Parkhead turf. As well as lifting the league with the team, he naturally received every individual award going, as he was named Player of the Year by the SFA, PFA and the Scottish Premiership. It would never get better than this for the striker in terms of goals. He also seemed to be growing up, as comments he made after signing a new long-term deal with the club provided encouraging signs that he was leaving his troubled past behind him, and I quote, "I don't see why I really need to leave this club. This is a bigger club than 3/4 of the English Premier League. If you look at me beforehand, I was still doing daft stuff stuff off the field, and I've kinda quietened down a bit now, and I had to because I was almost staring the exit door in the face. Very nice words indeed, but they would eventually turn out to be empty and hollow. Griffiths would struggle for game time the following season, partly because of injuries and partly because of the arrival of one Moussa Dembele. Leigh would have his part to play though, as he broke back into the first team for the business end of the campaign, scoring 4 and assisting 5 in Celtic's final 6 league games as the team secured an historic Invincible treble. In the summer directly following that triumphant campaign, Griffiths provided the Tartan Army with 2 amazing moments, scoring his first goal for Scotland with a sumptuous equalising free kick against England. He scored again from a set piece just 3 minutes later, in the 90th minute, to put Scotland 2-1 up and send fans up and down the country into raptures. Harry Kane would break Scottish hearts and level in injury time, but Griffiths had provided the fans with a moment of joy that will not soon be forgotten. His returns would continue to diminish as he found himself involved in more scandal and controversy over the next few seasons. He was in hot water right from the get-go of the 2017-18 campaign, as he was at the centre of a number of incidents in a fiery Champions League qualifying match against Linfield in Belfast, Celtic's first game of the season. In a tense away encounter, fraught with political and religious tensions, the home fans threw missiles onto the field, some directed at Griffiths, who picked up a bucky bottle which was launched from the stands and showed it to the ref. He was booked for time wasting. At the end of the match, as Celtic celebrated their 2-0 victory in front of a small contingent of fans, the striker got a scar from one of the spectators and tied it to the Linfield goalpost, sparking fury amongst already riled up home fans. The incident hit headlines across Europe and Griffiths was charged by UEFA. The same season, the player continued to show his uncanny knack for getting up the nose of rivals Rangers as he again used the flag of a fan to incite anger, celebrating his goal with one and reportedly wiping his snot-filled snooter on one of the Ibrox corner flags. The striker would miss the bulk of the 2018-19 season, as the club gave him special leave to deal with some personal issues, namely a crippling gambling addiction which had been having a major negative impact on his life, and he even had to take the step of self-excluding from some bookies. An injury would keep him out for a decent chunk of the 1920 season, and he was also quite shite when he was fit. He got his act into gear at the end of that season though, as he started to develop another decent partnership, this time with French Eddie, and rediscover something resembling close to his best form as he scored 7 and assisted 3 in the final 10 games of a season curtailed by the pandemic. Lockdown was not kind to Griffiths, as it came at a time when he arguably had the wind in his sails and was starting to build some momentum with Celtic again. 3 months trapped inside allowed Leigh to indulge in all of his guilty pleasures as he returned to training at least a stone overweight, much to the fury of manager Neil Lennon. The gaffer revealed that the Lennoxtown facilities had been open to players throughout lockdown, and the ones based in Scotland took advantage of this. Well, not Leigh, who according to Lennon didn't bother to turn up even one day in those 3 months. The 2021 campaign was a dark and disastrous one for the club and Griffiths.
It's bitterly disappointing.
As manager Neil Lennon fumbled the bag, failing to secure 10 in a row for Celtic. Griffiths was injured for the first months of the season and then was in and out of the first team after recovering, scoring a handful of goals before Neil Lennon hooked him at half-time after an abject performance in a shock 2-1 loss to St Mirren. He was rarely seen after that as Celtic's season went off the rails completely. The summer of 2021 was one of great change for the club and the player, as Griffiths' contract was set to expire and many fans thought that the time was right, as sad as it was for a once great player to leave the club. Incoming manager Ange Postecoglou had other ideas and thought he would try to turn the fortunes of the player around, and he was given a 1-year extension on 1st of July.
He's had a very good career at Celtic and has contributed, and if there are people who express dissatisfaction, well, it's up to him to show with his performances.
This show of faith was almost immediately thrown back in the manager's face, as a week later the news broke that police were investigating allegations that Griffiths had sent inappropriate messages to an underage girl. He was sent home from the summer training camp, and while the police later announced that there was nothing criminal in the messages, that kind of shit sticks, and what was left of the striker's reputation was in tatters, and his own fans made their feelings about the player perfectly clear, booing him during a friendly match against West Ham, and chants of pedo or sex offender have followed him around grounds up and down the country ever since. He wouldn't make a competitive appearance for Ange and was loaned to former club Dundee till the new year. It was a chance for him to get his career back on track, but sadly it was a chance he could not take, as he was unable to rein in his reactive and fiery nature, getting himself involved in unnecessary incidents with fans, most notably receiving punishment for kicking a flare into a crowd of spectators who were chanting pedo at him. Celtic terminated his contract in January 2021, marking a disappointing end to an 8-year stay with the boys in which he had won 14 trophies with the club, including a treble-treble, and he scored 123 goals in all competitions. He rejected Dundee and signed for Falkirk in League One, where he didn't do much better. He was a free agent for a while, and he now plays with Mandurah City, a semi-pro Australian lower league team where he gets into fights with old men on the touchline. To sum up, Leigh Griffiths is one of the most naturally gifted strikers that Scotland has produced in decades. His pace, agility and clever movement meant that he could play off the shoulder of the defender and nip in behind. His excellent first touch, close control and confidence meant he could take his man on and beat him, and his power and tenacity meant he could shrug defenders off and bully them off the ball. He was a composed and clinical finisher who could stick the ball away given just the slightest glance at goal, and of course, his free kicks were banging. However, his sheer lack of professionalism and a casual attitude to the sport, coupled with his dangerously short fuse and hot head, along with his proclivity for being a bit of a wrong'un, means that his career will be remembered for all those negative things rather than his on-field achievement.